Hi guys, welcome to Little Wicket Railway. I'm Rob and in this video we're taking a look at the Hornby Class 87, the City of Birmingham. This is Hornby reference R30031 and it's a loco that was announced by Hornby as part of the 2021 range but was only released in 2023. And this is a relatively new tooling. I think it dates back to 2017, but it might have been tweaked a bit since then. But I still consider that new enough to expect a high level of quality and detail, especially since it's got a recommended retail price of, wait for it, £240. That's a lot of money for a DCC ready model, and to put that into perspective, the DCC ready Accurascale Class 31, which is a similar size model, is only £170. So I've yet to look at the model, but the gut feel is that there's no way this model is going to be worth £240. I get the impression that probably due to the price, these weren't flying off the shelves. So recently they've been heavily discounted at the retailers and you can get one now for around £129, which seems a far more reasonable price. So I took advantage of that reduction and grabbed what I hope is a bargain. I spent a decade living in and around Birmingham, so although it's not really my era, it'll be nice to add the City of Birmingham to the collection. If you'd like to buy one of these yourself, then I'll put an affiliate link down below in the comments. Any purchases made through there don't cost you any more, but help to support the channel. Right, I'll get this unboxed, take some photos, and whilst I'm doing that, here's some history on the Class 87 and 87009, the City of Birmingham. The British Rail Class 87 is a type of electric locomotive built between 1973 and 1975 for use on the West Coast Main Line. A total of 36 units were produced by British Rail Engineering Limited at Crewe Works. These locomotives were primarily designed for high-speed passenger services, capable of operating at speeds up to 110 miles per hour, and were intended to improve reliability and performance on one of the UK's busiest rail corridors. The Class 87 was introduced following the electrification of the West Coast Main Line, forming the backbone of the intercity services between London Euston, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool and Glasgow. Their introduction marked a significant step in British Rail's modernisation efforts during the 1970s. These locomotives were known for their powerful traction, driven by a 5,000 horsepower electric motor, making them ideal for hauling long and heavy express trains. With the introduction of the Class 90 in the late 1980s, the Class 87 fleet began to be gradually phased out. However, many remained in service through the 1990s, continuing to run express services until the early 2000s. After privatisation, some units were operated by Virgin Trains until their final withdrawal from UK mainline service in 2006. Several Class 87s were sold abroad, most notably to Bulgaria, where they continued to see use, and a handful of units have been preserved in the UK. Number 87009, named City of Birmingham, entered service in November 1973, and it initially wore the standard British Rail blue livery, but in the mid-1980s it was repainted into the stylish Intercity Executive livery. Throughout its service in the UK, 87009 hauled both express passenger services and occasional freight, remaining active until the early 2000s. In 2012, 87009 was exported to Bulgaria, where it continued to work for freight operator Bullmarket. Right, let's get back to the model. And here it is. I really like the Intercity Executive livery, and on this model it's been smartly applied and the paintwork looks really good. Small features such as the door handles have also been neatly highlighted. There's not a huge amount of printed detail on this model. We've got the panel by the cab, the running number, the BR logo and the City of Birmingham nameplate. And the accessories bag comes with separate metal plates that can also be attached. At each end we've got sprung buffers and some separately fitted details such as TDM cables, wipers and a railing. And also in the accessories pack we've got more optional detail that can be fitted to the ends. Also in the accessories pack we've got the NEM couplings, and I've chosen just to fit the one. The inside of the cabs are a bit disappointing, with only moulded plastic detail in a single colour. Nothing's been painted up, not even a sticker showing any gauges. And there's no crew included with this model either, and that's something that Hornby have started doing again, so it was a bit disappointing not to have it in this model. I was surprised to find that the railings up to the cab doors are separately fitted, which is nice, but they sit so close to the body that they may as well have been moulded. There's plenty going on up on the roof with the pantograph and associated equipment. The pantograph feels a bit flimsy though, and apart from a spring and one rod, it's plastic, which feels quite fragile. The instructions say just to pull up on the collector head, but having tried that, it didn't feel right and I was convinced that I was going to break it. I found that a better way was to move it slightly to the side of the retaining clip and then to gently ease it up. Then to get it down, they suggest just pushing down. Again, I felt like that was going to result in something snapping off, so I think it's better to move it slightly to the side and around the plastic clip before trying to move it down. The whole design though just feels fragile. Why couldn't the pantograph be made of metal? Even my uncle's model of a Class 86 has a metal pantograph, and that was made in the 1970s. I also think that for an RRP of £240, we might have expected the pantograph to be servo operated. My only other issue with the roof area is that underneath the pantograph stuff, it's all this one light grey colour, and for all I know, that might be 100% accurate for a loco that's just left the works. In most of the videos I've looked at where you can see the roof, they're generally filthy, so it's not really possible to tell, but it just feels a bit odd that you've got quite a bit of moulded detail and a number of separately fitted parts, but it's all just one shade of grey. Were there no metallic parts or variations in materials? Maybe it's accurate. If you know what the roof of a newly built Class 87 looks like, then let me know in the comments if this is how it looks. But to me, it just doesn't feel quite right. And if there was ever a candidate for weathering, I think it would be this model. Heading down to the underframe now, and there's a good level of detail here. Lots of pipework highlighted and plenty of moulded equipment in the central sections, which is different on either side. And they've got this nice metal mesh effect, which continues underneath. All the wheels have wiper pickups, and underneath in the middle, we've got this switch which changes the lighting settings from day to night mode. I'm not sure how I feel about having physical switches on the underside of models for this kind of thing. Personally, as a lover of DCC, I feel that functions should have removed the need for physical switches, but I do appreciate there are still a lot of DC analog lovers out there who might appreciate the lighting control. Although having to lift the loco off the rails to access the switches isn't ideal. Speaking of lighting, the model has illuminated lights at the front and the rear, which look very nice. It also has cab lighting, but apologies, I don't have any footage of the cab lighting because I couldn't find a function that turned it on with the decoder I was using, but it would probably only highlight how bland the cab interior was anyway. Apparently the cab lighting will only operate when the loco is stationary, and it will automatically dim when the loco is in motion, which is a nice feature. To get inside the model, you just unclip the body shell and it lifts away. The body was a tight fit, but once you get your nails or a spudger in there, it does lift off quite easily. Personally, again, I don't like clip-on bodies. I always feel like I'm stressing the plastic and risk damaging the paintwork, and I would much prefer a few screws to hold the body on. But we do still have a few screws to deal with in this model, because if you want to access the motor, the decoder socket or the speaker housing, then you need to remove these two screws and lift away the PCB, being careful not to stress the wiring. There's just enough room to turn the PCB to the side, but again, it's not an ideal design. Underneath the PCB, we've got the 5-pole motor with dual flywheels driving both bogies, which all looks really good. Then there's a dedicated space for the speaker at one end, which is thoughtful, but it seems to have been designed for a round speaker rather than the HM7000 sugar cubes. And at the other end, there's the socket for the decoder. But this is where I found my first big issue with the model. The instructions clearly show a Hornby 21-pin decoder fitting into this space. And it does on its own, but if you plug a speaker into the socket, then it just won't fit. I tried everything. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Let me know in the comments if I've missed something obvious, but I just couldn't get it to go in. Well, actually, at one point I did get it to fit in, but no sound came out, and that's because the socket for the speaker had been pushed off the decoder by the chassis when the PCB was refitted. I wonder if anyone from Hornby has actually checked to see if their own decoder and speaker combination fit into this model. So unless someone tells me a special way of getting this to work, I'm going to have to solder the speaker onto the board, which isn't ideal, obviously, but I've got time to do that because the Class 87 TXS sound file and function profile aren't due out until mid-2025. Apart from this silly design flaw, the chassis to me seems good and contains a significant amount of metal, which means that the model weighs in at around 470 grams. So that's pretty much all there is to say about the model from just looking at it. Let's get it on the tracks and see how it runs. Here we are on the tracks, and I've paired it with a rake of 4 Intercity Executive livery coaches, and for the reasons already explained, there's no sound from the loco, unfortunately. Also, apologies, I don't have any overhead wires on my layout for this electric loco, so you'll just have to let that slide. In terms of performance, I've had this loco for quite some time now. It's been running for a good few hours, and I'm pleased to report that it's been without incident. Derailments, mechanical disasters or bits falling off might make for more interesting content, but this just ran well from the moment it hit the rails, absolutely no drama, just the way it should be. Maybe it's a good thing there's no speaker sound though, because I've been able to appreciate just how quiet and smooth the motor runs. It's actually very impressive and clearly has some power, which combined with the weight means it'll have no issues pulling a long rake. It crawls well at slow speed, and it's also got a decent top speed, so performance wise it's full marks from me. In my opinion, there was no way this model was ever worth the full RRP of £240 though, and I'm really glad I waited for the sale. 130 feels about right for this. Hornby have got the basics right on this one, and it's a solid model, but I feel like they may have skimped on some of the extras such as the cab detail and the construction of the pantograph, which feels like it's not going to survive being raised or lowered that frequently. The fact that Hornby's decoder and speaker combo won't fit into the model is a silly mistake, but I suspect the design for the model was probably done just before HM7000 existed, so maybe that explains it. Anyway, that's about it for this video. If you're interested in buying one of these, then I'll put an affiliate link in the description below. Special thanks to all the YouTube members and patrons for supporting the channel, it's very much appreciated and your names are on screen now. If you've enjoyed this video, then please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll leave you with a few more shots of the city of Birmingham running around the layout. Thanks for watching, and I will hopefully see you again soon.